You know that feeling when you finally pull the trigger on something you've been eyeing for months, maybe years? For me, it was a Japanese bench chisel, a real one, hand-forged, laminated steel, beautiful handle wrapped with a steel hoop. I'd read about these things for years, watched videos of Japanese craftsmen peeling off these impossibly thin, translucent shavings, and I finally decided I was going to own one. So I did. And the first time I put it to a piece of hard maple, the edge crumbled. Not wore down, not dulled, crumbled. Little microchips right along the cutting edge, like someone had taken sandpaper to a razor blade. My first thought was, I got ripped off. My second thought was that the steel was defective. Turns out, I was wrong on both counts. And today I'm going to show you exactly what's really happening when a Japanese chisel chips, why it has nothing to do with the quality of the steel, and how to fix it in about 2 minutes on a sharpening stone. Plus, stick around because I've got a tip at the end about reading the back of your chisel that most people skip entirely, and it makes a bigger difference than you'd expect. Let's get into it. What we're really talking about today is edge geometry, not steel quality, not craftsmanship, not whether you bought the right brand. This is about understanding why a Japanese chisel is ground the way it is, what that geometry was designed to do, and what happens when you ask it to do something it was never set up for. Once you understand this one thing, everything clicks into place. So let me back up and tell you where this understanding came from, because it wasn't from a book. When I first started getting interested in Japanese woodworking tools, I did what most of us do. I read articles, watched videos, and tried to piece together how these tools worked from a Western perspective, and I kept running into this disconnect. People would talk about how incredibly sharp Japanese chisels are, how they hold an edge longer, how the steel is superior, and then, in the same breath, you'd see forum posts from guys saying their expensive Japanese chisel chipped the first time they used it. Both things seemed true, and that didn't make any sense to me. It wasn't until I spent some real time studying how traditional Japanese woodworkers actually use their tools that I started to understand. In Japan, the primary building and furniture woods for centuries have been softwoods, hinoki cypress, sugi cedar, paulownia. These are relatively soft, straight-grained woods that respond beautifully to a keen, thin edge. The entire tool-making tradition evolved around these materials. The blacksmiths who forge these chisels aren't making general-purpose tools for any wood on earth. They're making tools optimized for a specific relationship between steel, geometry, and material. And that relationship is incredibly refined. A traditional Japanese carpenter working hinoki with a properly prepared chisel can achieve a surface that looks and feels like it was polished. No sandpaper, no finish, just steel meeting wood in exactly the right way. The philosophy behind this is worth understanding because it explains everything that follows. In the Japanese woodworking tradition, the tool is not a brute force instrument. It's a precision cutting edge that you guide through the material. You don't force it. You don't pry with it. You don't use it as a lever. You present the edge to the wood and let the geometry do the work. That whole system, the steel, the grind, the technique, the wood species, it all works together as a single integrated approach. Pull one element out of that system, say by switching from soft hinoki to dense hard maple, and you've changed the equation in a way the tool wasn't designed for. That's not a flaw in the tool, it's a mismatch, and the fix is straightforward once you see it clearly. Let me walk you through how these chisels are actually built, because it matters. A Japanese chisel isn't made from a single piece of steel the way most Western chisels are. It's a laminated construction. There's a thin layer of very hard, high-carbon steel, forge welded to a thicker body of softer, more flexible iron. The Japanese call the hard steel heigane and the soft iron jigane. The hard steel forms the cutting edge. The soft iron forms the body and provides shock absorption and flexibility. The hard steel is typically what's called white steel or blue steel, shirogami or ayogami in Japanese. White steel number 1, which is what you'll find in many high-end chisels, can be hardened to around 63 to 65 on the Rockwell C scale. For comparison, most quality Western bench chisels sit around 58 to 61. That difference might not sound like much, but in practical terms, it's enormous. At 64 or 65 Rockwell, the steel takes an edge that is almost unbelievably sharp. We're talking about a level of keenness that most Western chisels physically cannot achieve because their steel isn't hard enough to support that thin an edge. But here's the trade-off, and this is the part most people don't fully appreciate until they've experienced it firsthand. Hardness and brittleness are directly related in steel. The harder you make steel, the less it can flex before it fractures. At 64 Rockwell, you have steel that will take a phenomenal edge, but has very little tolerance for lateral stress, impact, or being pushed into material that resists it aggressively. The soft iron backing helps absorb some of that shock, but the cutting edge itself is still that hard, thin, brittle again. It's not a design flaw. It's an intentional engineering decision that makes perfect sense within the system it was designed for. Now here's the piece that ties it all together: the bevel angle. When a Japanese chisel comes from the maker, or when it's sharpened in the traditional manner, it's typically honed at around 20 to 25 degrees. Some finished chisels are even lower, down around 18 degrees. Think about that for a second. You have extremely hard steel, ground to an extremely acute angle. The result is an edge so fine it can slice individual wood fibers cleanly, which is why the surface finish is so remarkable. On Hinoki cypress, which has a janka hardness of around 410 pounds, that edge glides through like a hot knife through butter. The wood doesn't push back hard enough to stress the edge. Now take that same edge, same chisel, same steel, same 22-degree bevel, and push it into white oak. White oak has a janka hardness of around 1360. That's more than 3 times harder than Hinoki. And it's not just harder. White oak has dense rays, interlocked grain patterns, and silica content that acts almost like fine sandpaper on a cutting edge. Hard maple is even worse in terms of pure density, around 1450 janka. And if you've ever worked with something like IPE or Jatoba, you're up around 3500. By the way, if you are enjoying learning about these ancient methods, I put together something I think you will really appreciate. It is called Kenji's Workshop, and it is a collection of 100 Ancient Eastern Woodworking Secrets for the Modern Craftsman. Techniques like the ones we are covering today, and a whole lot more. You can grab your copy by scanning the QR code on screen, or just use the first link in the description. All right, let us keep going. Here's what physically happens at the cutting edge when you push that thin, low-angle bevel into dense hardwood. The wood fibers don't separate cleanly the way they do in softwood. They resist. They push back against the edge with significant force, and because the edge is so thin and the steel is so hard, it can't flex to absorb that force. Instead, it does what all very hard, very thin materials do under stress. It fractures. You get micro-chipping along the cutting edge. Sometimes you can see it with the naked eye, tiny scallops or irregularities right at the tip. Sometimes you need a loupe or a magnifying glass. But you can always feel it. Run your fingertip very lightly along the edge, perpendicular to the blade. And instead of that smooth, scary sharpness, you feel roughness. Little jagged points where tiny pieces of steel have broken away. This is not the steel failing. This is geometry failing. You're asking an edge that was designed to slice soft, cooperative fibers to instead bulldoze through dense, resistant ones. The steel is doing exactly what physics dictates it will do. The thin, unsupported edge at 22 degrees simply cannot withstand the compressive and lateral forces that dense hardwood generates. It's the same reason you wouldn't use a straight razor to whittle hickory. The edge is too refined for the application. And here's the part that should make you feel a lot better about that chisel sitting on your bench. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. You don't need to regrind the entire bevel. You don't need to send it back to be retempered. You don't need a different chisel. All you need to do is add a small secondary micro bevel at a steeper angle, and you can do it in about 2 minutes on your sharpening stone. Here's exactly how I do it. I keep my primary bevel right where it is, around 22 to 25 degrees, depending on the chisel. That primary bevel is doing the work of reducing the overall wedge angle and creating the basic edge geometry. Then, at the very tip, I add a secondary bevel at about 30 to 35 degrees. The width of this micro bevel is tiny. We're talking about maybe 1/32 of an inch. Just a hair. You can barely see it, but the effect is dramatic. What this micro bevel does is add material behind the cutting edge. Think of it as a buttress. Instead of the edge coming to a thin, unsupported point at 22 degrees, it now has a small ramp of steel supporting it at a steeper angle. That additional material behind the edge dramatically increases the edge's ability to resist the compressive forces that dense hardwood generates. The edge is still incredibly sharp, still far keener than most Western chisels, but now it has the structural support to handle tougher materials without fracturing. To add this micro bevel, I use my finest stone, usually a 3000 grit or higher synthetic water stone. I raise the handle of the chisel just slightly, maybe 2 to 3 degrees above my normal sharpening angle, and take 5 to 10 light passes. That's it. You'll feel the burr form on the back very quickly because you're only removing a tiny amount of material. Flip the chisel over, lay the back dead flat on the stone, and take 1 or 2 passes to remove the burr. Done. Your total time investment is somewhere around 90 seconds to 2 minutes. The first time I did this and went back to that same piece of hard maple that had destroyed my edge, the difference was immediate. The chisel cut cleanly, no chipping. The surface quality wasn't quite as glass smooth as what you'd get with the original low-angle bevel on soft cedar, but it was still remarkably good. Far better than any Western chisel I own. And the edge held up. I paired an entire set of through mortises in white oak. And when I checked the edge under magnification afterward, it was still clean, no microchipping. That was the moment I realized this chisel wasn't effective. I had just been using it wrong. Now, beyond the bevel fix, there are some technique adjustments worth talking about, because geometry is only half the equation. The way you present the chisel to the wood matters enormously, especially with hard, high-carbon steel. First, ease into the cut. In softwood, you can take a fairly aggressive bite right from the start. In hardwood, start with thin passes and gradually increase depth. Let the edge establish a clean kerf before asking it to remove more material. Second, never pry with a Japanese chisel. I know that sounds obvious, but most of us have a habit of using a chisel as a mini lever to pop out waste. With Western chisels at 59 Rockwell, you can usually get away with it. With a Japanese chisel at 64 Rockwell, lateral force on that thin edge is exactly how you chip it. Cut straight down or pore at a consistent angle. If you need to remove waste from a mortise, chop vertically and scoop, don't pry sideways. Third, pay attention to grain direction even more carefully than you normally would. Cutting into end grain in dense hardwood generates the highest forces on the edge. When you can, approach end grain with a slicing motion rather than a straight-on push. Skew the chisel slightly so you're using a shearing cut. This distributes the force across a longer section of the edge rather than concentrating it at one point. Let me share some patterns I've noticed over the years, things I used to do myself, that once I understood Japanese chisel geometry, I realized were causing most of my problems. The first pattern is assuming all chisels work the same way, regardless of steel. I used my Japanese chisels exactly like I used my Western chisels for years. Same angles, same technique, same materials, and I kept getting inconsistent results and blaming the tools. The reality is that different steels at different hardnesses with different geometries require different approaches. That's not a burden. It's actually an advantage once you understand it, because you can match the right tool to the right job. The second pattern is sharpening Japanese chisels at the same angle as Western chisels. A lot of guys put their Japanese chisels in the same honing guide at the same angle they use for their Stanley or Narex chisels, usually around 30 degrees. At 30 degrees on a Japanese chisel, you're actually creating a steeper angle than necessary for softwood work, and you're changing the cutting characteristics the maker intended. The right approach is to learn what angle the chisel was originally ground to, maintain that as your primary bevel for softwood work, and add a micro bevel only when you're working harder materials. The third pattern is blaming the steel when the edge fails. I did this. A lot of us do this. The chisel chips, so we assume we got bad steel, or that Japanese chisels are overrated, or that the whole tradition is just marketing hype. In almost every case I've seen, the problem is geometry meeting the wrong material, not defective steel. Good Japanese chisel steel from a reputable maker is phenomenal. It just needs to be understood on its own terms. The fourth pattern is not flattening the back properly. This one is subtle but important. The back of a Japanese chisel, the ura, has a hollow ground area called the urasuki. If you don't properly flatten the rim around that hollow on a fine stone, you can't form a clean intersection between the back and the bevel. And without that clean intersection, your edge will always have tiny imperfections that become stress points where chipping begins. I'll talk more about this in the bonus tip. The good news is, once you see these patterns for what they are, the fix is simple, and the results are dramatic. The same chisel you were ready to return becomes the best edge tool in your shop. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning. This is about reading the back of your chisel, and I'm convinced most people either skip this step or don't do it carefully enough. When you get a new Japanese chisel, the back has that hollow, the urasuki, I mentioned. That hollow is there by design. It reduces the contact area that you need to keep flat, which makes flattening easier and faster. But here's what most people miss. The rim of flat steel around that hollow needs to be perfectly flat and polished for the chisel to work properly. And I don't mean pretty flat. I mean dead flat. Here's how I check it. I take a fine stone, at least 1,000 grit, and lay the back of the chisel on it with zero pressure, beyond the weight of the chisel itself. Then I take 3 or 4 light passes. When I pull the chisel off and look at the back in good light, I can see exactly where the stone made contact. If the contact is even all around the rim of the hollow, the back is flat. If it's only touching on one side or at the corners, I have work to do. I keep going with light pressure until I see an even, consistent polish all the way around. This usually takes me about 5 minutes on a new chisel, and the difference it makes to edge quality and edge retention is remarkable. You're creating the cleanest possible intersection between 2 planes of steel, and that intersection is your cutting edge. If one of those planes is uneven, the edge will always have weak points. Get the back right, and everything else becomes easier. One more thing before I let you go. I spent a long time gathering the best ancient Eastern woodworking methods I have come across, and I put them all into a book called Kenji's Workshop. 100 techniques that most modern woodworkers have never seen, with step-by-step photos and clear explanations you can actually follow in your shop. Scan the QR code on screen right now, or grab it from the first link in the description. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.